On a quiet summer morning in 1973, a wedding party set out to celebrate love. It was supposed to be a day of joy, a day of laughter, of promises, of forever. But by nightfall, they were gone. No distress call, no witnesses, no sign of struggle, just silence. At the center of it all were two people about to begin the rest of their lives together. Daniel Cole, a man known for his quiet strength, his unwavering kindness, and a heart that carried dreams far bigger than himself, and Elena Voss, a woman whose presence could light up a room, whose laughter lingered long after the moment had passed. Together, they were everything love was supposed to be: hopeful, certain, unbreakable. That morning, surrounded by family and friends, they boarded a boat along the coast of a small, peaceful town, a place where nothing ever really happened, a place where everyone felt safe. But somewhere between the shore and the horizon, something went wrong because the boat never came back. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. Search teams combed the waters. Divers went deeper than ever before. But there was nothing. No bodies, no wreckage, no clues. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. For half a century, the ocean kept its secret. The town moved on, but never forgot, until 50 years later, a deep-sea diver exploring waters long believed to be empty made a discovery that should have been impossible. A single object, resting where no one expected anything to be found. Small, forgotten, but unmistakable. The groom's ring. And with it, a question that refuses to stay buried. What really happened to the wedding that never returned? Long before the mystery, before the whispers, before the ocean took more than it ever gave back, there was a love story, a simple one, the kind people believe only exists in dreams. His name was Daniel Cole. Daniel wasn't born into comfort. Life for him had always been something you worked through, not something you waited on. He grew up learning that nothing came easy, and that everything worth having required patience. He was quiet, but not weak, reserved, but never distant. People in town didn't just know Daniel. They relied on him. If something broke, he fixed it. If someone struggled, he showed up, not for praise, not for recognition, just because that's who he was. Music slightly swells, but beneath that quiet life was a man with a vision. Daniel wanted more, not for himself, but for the life he hoped to build one day. A home filled with peace, a love that didn't leave, a future that felt certain. Pause, and then there was Elena Voss. If Daniel was steady, Elena was alive. She carried warmth in a way that made people pause, as if the world slowed down just to feel it. Her smile wasn't just seen, it was felt. People admired her, not because she tried to stand out, but because she couldn't help it. She had a way of making others feel important, like they mattered, like they belonged. But behind that light was a heart that had known pain. Elena loved deeply, completely, and once that love had been broken. Since then, she had learned to protect herself, to be careful, to be cautious. But no matter how hard she tried, she never lost her belief in something real. Their story didn't begin with certainty. It began with chance. A missed bus, a sudden storm, and two strangers standing closer than they expected. Elena stood quietly, watching the rain, lost in her thoughts, until, "Looks like we're both stuck here for a while," as said by Daniel. She turned, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't instant. It wasn't overwhelming. It was subtle. A conversation that felt easy. A silence that didn't need filling. A connection that didn't ask for attention. From that day on, they kept finding each other at the same cafe, on the same streets, at moments that felt almost planned, but they weren't. It just happened. But love, especially the kind that feels right, rarely comes without resistance. Daniel had responsibilities he couldn't ignore, a family that depended on him, dreams that demanded sacrifice. There were nights he questioned everything, whether he could give Elena the life she deserved, or if loving her meant holding her back. And Elena, she carried fear, the kind that doesn't shout, but whispers. What if this doesn't last? What if I lose everything again? There were moments when distance crept in, when words went unspoken, when silence lingered longer than it should, moments when walking away felt easier than staying. But they didn't walk away, not fully, because every time they tried to let go, they found their way back. Daniel didn't just love Elena. He chose her every day, through every doubt. And Elena didn't just fall for Daniel. She trusted him with the parts of her she had once hidden from the world. Their love wasn't loud. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in a world full of uncertainty, that was everything. So when Daniel finally stood before her, hands unsteady, heart racing, and asked her to spend forever with him, there was no hesitation, no fear, only tears, and a quiet yes. To everyone around them, they were the perfect couple, the kind of love people admired, the kind they believed would last forever. And maybe that's what made what came next so impossible to understand, because sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that leave behind the deepest mysteries. In a town where little ever changed, this was something different, something special. For weeks, everyone had been preparing. The baker worked through the night, perfecting a cake that had to be flawless. Neighbors hung ribbons along the narrow streets, each one carefully tied, as if love itself could be woven into the celebration. Because this wasn't just any wedding. This was their wedding, Daniel and Elena. To the people of the town, they weren't just a couple. They were a symbol of hope, of something pure, of a love that had endured and still stood strong. guests arriving, smiling, greeting each other. People came from near and far, old friends, distant relatives. Even those who barely knew them felt compelled to witness something rare. But beneath the laughter, beneath the excitement, there were undercurrents, small things, easy to miss if you weren't looking closely. The best man, Marcus Halley, a well-dressed man, smiling but distracted, Daniel's closest friend, loyal, charismatic, always the life of the room. But that day, something was different. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes. His laughter came a second too late, and more than once he glanced toward the ocean, as if expecting something, or someone. Then there were the bridesmaids, Elena surrounded by them, adjusting her dress with soft laughters. They moved around her like light, filling the room with warmth and joy. But one of them, Clara, she was quieter than the others, watching, observing. At one point, she reached for Elena's hand, holding it just a little longer than expected. Clara said in soft but almost hesitant tone, "Are you absolutely sure about everything?" There was a brief silence while Elena smiles gently. Elena, reassuring, "I've never been more sure of anything." Clara nods, but something in her expression lingers. Even the families carried their own unspoken tensions. Daniel's father stood apart from the crowd, watching quietly, pride in his eyes, but something else beneath it, concern. Elena's mother, adjusting her dress, forcing a smile, on the other hand, smiled too much, as if holding back something she refused to let surface. And then there was this weather. Sound of wind begins to rise slightly. That morning, the sky had been clear, bright, endless, perfect. But as the hours passed, something shifted. Clouds gathered slowly at first, barely noticeable. The breeze grew colder, sharper. Decorations fluttering harder, ocean waves slightly more aggressive. Some called it coincidence. Others didn't. An old fisherman, standing near the docks, watched the horizon in silence, his face unreadable, until someone asked, a guest asked, light-hearted, "Storm coming?" The fisherman shakes his head slowly. Fisherman said, "Not a storm." He paused and looks out at the sea. He continued by saying it was something else. Most people laughed it off, brushed it aside. After all, this was a day for joy, not fear. But sometimes the signs are there, not loud enough to stop us, but clear enough that we remember them later. As the ceremony drew closer, as the laughter grew louder, as Daniel and Elena stood on the edge of forever. No one realized that this wedding would not be remembered for its beauty, but for what happened after. There was a sound of gentle waves against wood, seagulls overhead. The sun glistens on the ocean. By late afternoon, the celebration had only just begun. The wedding party has already gathered at the dock, laughter echoing and dresses flowing in the breeze. The plan was simple. A short boat ride along the coast, a private continuation of the celebration just beyond the eyes of the town. It was meant to be unforgettable. One by one, they stepped aboard. Daniel first, offering his hand to Elena. Steady, reassuring. She smiles, takes his hand, and steps onto the boat. Behind them, friends followed. Laughter, champagne glasses clinking, voices overlapping in excitement. Bridesmaids were adjusting dresses, groomsmen joking, and someone taking photos. For a moment, everything felt exactly as it should. Perfect. There was a pause, and subtle shift begins. The man at the helm was Captain Elias Ward, who was an older man, weathered face, steady eyes, and hands firm on the wheel. He had spent most of his life on these waters, knew every current, every hidden depth, every change in the wind. People trusted him, because if there was one place he belonged, it was the sea. But that day, even he seemed different. Captain glancing toward the horizon, tightening his grip slightly, quieter than usual, more focused, as if listening to something no one else could hear. Ocean sounds become more pronounced. The boat pulled away from the dock, cutting gently through the water. The town slowly faded behind them, shoreline growing distant and voices still cheerful. At first, the mood was light. Laughter filled the air. Stories were shared. Glasses raised in celebration. Daniel and Elena were laughing together, surrounded by friends. It was everything a wedding should be. Now, tone begins to shift subtly. But then, something changed. As wind sound increases, the breeze grew colder, sharper. A bridesmaid was struggling to pull her shawl closer. The sky, though still bright, felt heavier somehow, and the water, was too still. Unnaturally calm ocean surface. Captain Elias frowned slightly, his eyes drifting to the instrument panel. Compass needle flickers, then spins briefly. He tapped it once, then again. The needle refused to settle. Low, subtle tension sound enters. He said nothing, just adjusted the wheel, as if correcting a course no one else could see. Meanwhile, laughter continues in the background, fading slightly. Then, sound abruptly drops. Music cuts for a split second. Silence. Complete stillness. No seagulls. No wind. It happened so quickly. Most didn't notice it at first, but for a brief moment, everything stopped. Guests looked around, confused. The waves no longer lapped against the boat. The wind disappeared. Even the air felt different, heavier. Then sound slowly returns, but this time unnatural and hollow. Someone laughed nervously, brushing it off, but not everyone did. Marcus, the best man, scanning the water uneasily. And then a voice from a guest, uneasy, pointing toward the water. Did anyone else just see that? The group turns. At first, there's nothing, just water, still, endless. Then a faint ripple surfaced. Then something beneath the surface, moving, not like a wave, not like a fish, something slower, deliberate, distorted shape just below the waterline. The guest steps closer to the edge, squinting. Same guest whispered, "There's something in the water." Silence spreads among the group. Daniel instinctively reaches for Elena's hand. She grips it tightly. Captain Elias notices the shift, his eyes narrowing. He looks ahead, then back at the compass, still unstable. Whatever it was, it didn't surface. It didn't make a sound. It simply disappeared. Water returns to stillness. Music slowly creeps back in, darker now. A nervous laugh breaks the tension. Someone jokes. Another raises a glass. And just like that, the moment is dismissed, forgotten, almost instantly, but not entirely, because from that point on, the laughter didn't come as easily. The air felt different, heavier, subtle unease on faces, fewer smiles, distant glances, and though no one said it out loud, they all felt it. Something wasn't right. Music deepened slightly as the boat carried them farther from shore, farther from everything familiar. No one realized they were no longer alone. In low ambient tone, the ocean was at dusk. The horizon darkens as the sun sinks. Wind rises softly. By nightfall, the celebration should have been over. The boat should have returned. But it didn't. The dock was empty, ribbons fluttering, lights still glowing from the earlier celebration. At first, no one panicked. Delays happened. The ocean was unpredictable. People waited, watched the horizon, expected to see lights approaching in the distance. But the horizon remained empty. Music dips lower. Hours passed. Laughter faded into silence. Conversations turned into questions. Where are they? What's taking so long? Elena's mother pacing. Daniel's father staring out into the darkness. And then, concern turned into fear. Sound of wind intensifies slightly. By midnight, the celebration had become something else entirely. A gathering of uncertainty. Lanterns were being lit along the shore. People calling out into the darkness. By early morning, the search began. The Coast Guard was called. Search boats were cutting through dark waters, flashing lights reflecting on waves. Experienced officers, trained for emergencies, spread across the sea, scanning, listening, waiting for anything. A signal, a flare, a trace. But there was nothing. Villagers joined in smaller boats and calling names into the wind. The townspeople refused to stand by. Fishermen, neighbors, friends, they took to the water themselves, determined to find something, anything. Voices echoing. Daniel, Elena. There was this pause that made sound fades into emptiness. Days passed, then more days. The search grew wider, deeper. Divers went down into waters few dared to explore. Underwater darkness in endless depths. But the ocean gave nothing back. No wreckage, no broken wood, no floating debris. Not even a single personal belonging. It was as if the boat had never existed. Officials tried to explain it. A sudden current, a hidden reef, an unexpected accident. But none of it made sense, because even in the worst disasters, the ocean leaves something behind. But this time, it didn't. Empty sea stretching endlessly. Families waited on the shore, refusing to leave, holding on to hope long after it should have faded. Elena's mother staring at the horizon. Daniel's father, gripping his hands tightly, each passing day, made the truth harder to deny. Emotional weight increases. The search eventually ended. The boats returned. The waters grew quiet again, and the town was left with nothing but questions. Fade to darker tones. No answers. No closure. No goodbye. So they weren't coming back. It was as if the ocean had swallowed them without a trace. Occasional ticking sound underneath. Old files, typewriters, black and white photographs spread across a desk. When the search ended, the questions didn't. They only grew louder. Why? Because a boat doesn't just disappear. Not without reason. Not without leaving something behind. So the investigation began. Police officers are reviewing maps and marking coordinates. Every detail, every timeline, every possible explanation was examined. The first theory was the simplest. A storm. Perhaps the weather had turned suddenly. A violent shift. Something unexpected. But when officials checked the records, sound of paper flipping, there was nothing. No storm warnings. No unusual conditions. The skies that day had been clear. Pause. The ocean. Calm. Which made the first theory impossible. The second theory, sabotage. Could something have gone wrong on board? A mechanical failure, deliberately caused? Investigators inspected what little they had. Maintenance logs, fuel records, captain's reports. But even there, things didn't add up. Tension builds. Some records were missing. Pages that should have been there weren't. Dates that should have matched didn't. As if someone had gone back and erased parts of the story. Then came the third theory. Escape. A possibility few wanted to believe. What if they had planned it? A disappearance by choice. A way to leave everything behind and start over. But those who knew them rejected it immediately. Daniel would never abandon his family. Elena would never walk away without a word. And even if they did, what about everyone else? The entire wedding party? No, that theory didn't hold. So investigators looked closer, not at what happened, but at who might have been involved. The first name that surfaced was someone from Elena's past, a former lover, someone who had once held her heart and lost it. Their relationship had not ended peacefully. There had been arguments, accusations, and according to some, a refusal to let go. Witnesses claimed he had been seen in town just days before the wedding, watching, waiting. But when questioned, he denied everything. No proof tied him to the disappearance, only suspicion. Then there was Daniel's side, a small but growing business venture, one that had recently drawn attention. Not all of it friendly, a rival, someone who had lost money when Daniel succeeded. There had been disagreements, heated ones, words exchanged that some described as threats, but again, nothing concrete, no evidence, just fragments. And then there was the captain, Elias Ward. At first, he seemed like the least likely suspect, a man trusted by everyone, a life spent on the water. But as investigators dug deeper, they found things he had never spoken about. Old reports, incidents at sea that had been quietly closed, passengers who claimed strange experiences, journeys that ended differently than expected, nothing proven, nothing officially recorded as wrongdoing, but enough to raise questions. And then something else. On the day of the wedding, his route logs were incomplete, coordinates missing, times unaccounted for. It was as if he had taken them somewhere he didn't want anyone to find. Investigators tried to piece it together. Storm, sabotage, escape, foul play. But every path led to the same place. Nowhere. Because no matter how many theories they built, no matter how many questions they asked, one truth remained. There was no evidence, no witnesses, no answers. Only a story, with pieces that refused to fit. And the deeper they looked, the stranger it became. Some mysteries don't hide because they're unsolved, but because they were never meant to be understood. Distant sound of waves, the same coastal town, quieter now, almost frozen in time. When the investigation slowed, the town didn't return to normal. It couldn't. Empty dock, faded decorations still tied loosely, moving gently in the wind, because something had been taken. Not just people, but peace. In the days that followed, grief settled over the town like a shadow that refused to lift. Families gathered in silence, holding photographs. Mothers waited by windows that never opened. Fathers stood at the shore, staring into a horizon that gave nothing back. Friends replayed their last conversations, searching for something they might have missed, something they could have changed. But there were no answers, only absence. Empty chairs, untouched belongings, wedding items left behind. The celebration, meant to mark a beginning, became a memory that no one knew how to carry. And for one person, the loss was something else entirely. Eleanor's mother, an older woman sitting by a window, clutching a photograph, while others slowly began to accept what had happened. She refused to believe her daughter was gone, refused to let go. Soft tension builds under emotion. Every morning, she walked to the shore. Every evening, she waited, her standing alone at sunset, wind moving through her hair. People told her to move on, to find closure. But to her, closure meant accepting something she knew in her heart wasn't true. In her quiet and emotional tone, "She's still out there," she would say. "I can feel it," and no one could convince her otherwise. As time passed, the town changed, not all at once, but slowly, quietly. Fewer people outside, businesses closing earlier, streets emptier. Conversations became shorter, laughter less frequent, and the ocean was no longer just the ocean. It became something else, something people watched instead of trusted. And then the stories began. At first, They were whispers, fishermen returning late at night, claiming they had seen something in the distance, resembling faint silhouette of a boat far away, a boat floating where no boats should be, still, silent. Some said it matched the description of the one that never returned. Others spoke of lights, strange lights, beneath the water, moving slowly, too steady to be natural, too deep to be explained. Most dismissed it, rumors, grief playing tricks on the mind. But not everyone, because the stories didn't stop. They grew, more detailed, more consistent. People who had never spoken before began describing the same things, the same shapes, the same lights, the same feeling of not being alone. The town tried to ignore it, tried to move forward, but something lingered. The case eventually went cold. Files were closed, reports archived. Investigators moved on to cases that could still be solved. But here, nothing had been solved. Dusty case files were being placed into storage. No answers, no closure, no truth, only a story that refused to fade. Years passed, then decades. New faces came into town, unaware of what had happened. But the ones who stayed, they never forgot. Elena's mother is older now and still walking to the shore, and sometimes, late at night, when the ocean was at its quietest, people would swear they could still see it. A boat lost between here and somewhere else, waiting. The sound of deep water pressures fade in from black to modern-day ocean footage, vast, endless, unchanged. 50 years passed. The town changed. The world moved forward. But the ocean remained the same. And for most people, the story of the vanished wedding became just that, a story. Something told in quiet conversations, or remembered only by those who refused to forget. But not everyone saw it that way. Now introducing a new presence. His name was Adrian Locke, a man in his late 30s, 40s, focused, quiet, preparing diving equipment. A deep-sea diver, but not the kind who chased adventure for thrill or glory. Adrian is checking his oxygen tank, methodical, precise. Adrian was used to searching for things, lost things, forgotten things, things the ocean had taken and never returned, because to him, the ocean wasn't just water. It was a keeper of answers, and he had spent most of his life trying to take something back. Years ago, before the missions, before the long hours beneath the surface, Adrian had known loss. Someone close to him had disappeared, not in the same way, not in the same place, but the feeling was the same. No goodbye, no explanation, just absence. And ever since then, he had been drawn to the deep. Adrian descended into water as bubbles rose, not to escape, but to understand. Over the years, he built a reputation, precise, fearless, relentless. If something was lost beneath the ocean, Adrian Locke was the one people called, which is why, when a restricted zone off the coast of a quiet town was finally approved for limited exploration. His name came up. The area had been closed for decades, unofficially avoided, not because of confirmed danger, but because of what people believed lay beneath it. Adrian didn't believe in rumors. He believed in evidence, in facts, in what could be seen, measured, recovered. So when he arrived, he treated it like any other dive. Small modern vessel was seen floating above deep waters. Crew preparing equipment. Routine. Controlled. Predictable. But even before entering the water, he felt it. A stillness, different from anywhere else he had dived. The crew didn't say much, but their silence said enough. One crew member was glancing at the water uneasily. Adrian noticed, but said nothing, because fear was not something he allowed to guide him. There was a splash as he enters the water. The surface closed above him, and just like that, the world above disappeared. When underwater, dim blue fading into darkness. As he descended, light slowly gave way to shadow. The deeper he went, the quieter it became. Stillness. No fish. No movement. No life. Just water. And the weight of something unseen. Adrian checks instruments. Everything appears normal. But the silence feels unnatural. He continued downward, into a zone few had entered, and none had ever fully explored. Tension built slowly. The restricted area. The place where decades ago a boat had vanished. Long silence as he descends further. Adrian didn't know what he would find. Debris, maybe. Fragments. Nothing at all. There was unnatural stillness. But what he didn't expect was that this dive would change everything. Deep underwater ambience. Low, echoing hum. Darkness surrounds. Only the diver's light cuts through the void. The deeper Adrian descended, the less the ocean felt like water. The stillness, and more like silence. Narrow beam of light scanning endless darkness, and particles drift slowly. No movement. No sound. No life. Just depth. Soft mechanical breathing from Adrian's gear. His light moved carefully, sweeping across the ocean floor. Sand, rock, nothing unusual. Calmness. Until the light catches something faint, a shape, barely visible, half buried beneath layers of time. Adrian slowed, adjusted his position. He brushes away sediment carefully. At first, it looked like nothing, just another piece of forgotten debris. Pausing, but as the sand cleared, revealing a corroded, rusted object, metal, aged, unnatural in shape, it became something else. Soft tension rises. Metal, old, worn by decades beneath the sea. Adrian hovers closer, examining it. It wasn't large, but it didn't belong there. Calming, he reached out, hesitated for a brief moment, then grips it, lifting it gently from the ocean floor. As it moved, something else shifted beneath it, dipping to a near silence. Small, almost invisible. The glittering started revealing. Adrian noticed it immediately. He lowers the rusted object, focusing his light. There, half hidden in the sand, was something that shouldn't have survived. Stillness, something untouched. He reaches again, slower this time, careful, precise. His gloved fingers brush away the remaining grains, and then he lifts it into the light. A ring. He paused completely. Gold. Simple, but unmistakable. The ring reflecting faint light in the darkness. For a moment, Adrian just stared at it, as if trying to understand how something so small could feel so heavy. Soft breath through regulator. He turned it slowly, the light tracing its surface. And that's when he saw it, overshadowed by rising tensions. An engraving, faint but still there, protected somehow from time. Close-up revealed inside the band. Inside the band, engraved with a date. August 12th, 1973. Long silence. Adrian froze. Heartbeats risen, because he knew that date. Everyone did. It was the day the wedding party disappeared. Tension built up instantly, slowly, almost unwillingly. Adrian turned the ring again, searching, hoping for something that would prove him wrong. But there it was, a second engraving. Initials, worn out but still readable. D.C. What? Daniel Cole. Long pause and weight of realization settles. This wasn't just a ring, said in a soft, haunting tone. It was his ring. Adrian holding it in the darkness, alone with the discovery. The groom, who had vanished without a trace, had just been found. Stillness, not the man, not the boat, but something far more unsettling. There was soft whisper, proof. Adrian looks around, suddenly aware of the vast darkness surrounding him. Because if the ring was here, then something else had to be too. Long silence, and for the first time since the dive began, Adrian felt it. The stillness. He wasn't just searching anymore. He had found something that wasn't meant to be found. Low, echoing underwater, the sound feels distorted, almost unnatural. Darkness surrounds. The ring was never supposed to be there. Not after 50 years, not untouched, not waiting. Adrian still hovering in the deep, gripping the ring. His light flickers slightly. Something wasn't right. Not just about the discovery, but about the place itself. Soft distortion audio emerged, barely noticeable at first. Adrian checked his instruments. Depth normal. Oxygen stable. Being still. But the readings, subtle glitches, numbers flickering briefly, weren't holding steady. Slow, rising tension. The deeper he looked, the more the ocean stopped behaving like it should. Particles in water started moving unnaturally, some drifting upward, others frozen mid-motion. Currents shifted without direction. Sound traveled, then vanished. Time felt different. Soft heartbeat like rhythm begins. Adrian turned slowly, scanning the darkness, and then his light catches something far in the distance, a shape. He paused again. Not rock, not debris. Something structured, He moves closer, cautious, as the shape becomes clearer. Wood, a hull. Silence drops suddenly. A boat. Visual slowly reveals an old vessel, intact, untouched by decay, resting where it shouldn't be. Adrian froze. Because this, he paused, was impossible. Eerie sound unveiled. The structure was preserved. No collapse. No damage. No sign of time. Close-up revealed smooth surfaces where decay should have been. It looked, he paused, as if it had just arrived. He whispered, "Not 50 years ago." Adrian's breathing becomes slightly heavier. He moved closer, his light scanning the vessel. Details emerged. Decorations, faded but still visible. A ribbon, drifting slightly, untouched by rot. And then, close-up shows faint lettering on the side of the boat. The name. He paused. The same one recorded in the missing persons file. Silence. This was it. Tension deepens. The wedding boat. Long pause. But it wasn't wrecked. It wasn't destroyed. In soft and eerie tone, it was kept. Adrian circled slowly, confusion growing, and then he noticed something else. He paused. Movements, very faint, inside the boat. At first he thought it was light distortion, a trick of the water, but then it happens again, subtle, slow, tension heightened. Adrian's light steadies, focusing through an opening. Inside are shadows, shapes, almost like figures frozen in place. People. Silence. Standing. Still. Close up. A figure in formal wear. Unmoving, preserved. Not decayed. Not skeletal. He paused again and again. Intact? Adrian's breathing quickens, as if time had simply stopped. Everything becomes eerie, layered with soft whispers. A hand raised mid-gesture. A face turned in laughter. A moment. Frozen. There was another pause. The wedding party. Long silence. Adrian pulls back slightly, overwhelmed, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. Soft distortion grows louder, and then the water around him ripples without current. Everything shifts. Sound bends. His light flickers. For a brief moment, another pause. He hears something. Faint, distant laughter. Glasses clinking. A bride's soft voice, not through his equipment. He paused, but around him. Adrian turns quickly, nothing there. The sound disappears. There was silence momentarily. His heart pounds. Because now he understands. This wasn't just a wreck. He paused. It was a place. Said in soft whisper, a boundary. There was a faint shimmering distortion in the water around the boat. A line the boat had crossed without ever realizing it. A forbidden zone where time doesn't move forward and the past never leaves. Adrian looks back at the figures inside the boat, frozen forever. They didn't disappear. Everything paused. They were taken. Silence persisted, held between moments, between seconds, between worlds. Adrian grips the ring tighter. The only thing that somehow escaped, or was released. Long silence, and as he begins to ascend, he slowly moves upward, leaving the boat behind. The shape in the darkness remains, waiting, unchanged, because some places don't just keep secrets, they keep time itself. Slow fade from black to the ocean surface at dawn. Calm, almost too calm. When Adrian surfaced, he didn't speak. He paused. Not at first. Crew helping him onto the boat, removing his gear. His expression was distant and shaken. They asked what he found. He said very little. Soft pause, because how do you explain something that shouldn't exist? His hand slowly opening, revealing the ring. In the end, this was all he brought back, a single object, small, silent, but heavier than anything else recovered from the ocean in decades. He paused again. The ring, engraving very visible. August 12, 1973. There were soft inhales in his narration. It didn't take long for word to spread. Authorities were notified. Experts called in. Old files pulled from storage. Dusty case folders reopened. Documents laid out under bright lights. For the first time in 50 years, the case was reopened. Hope mixed with tension. Investigators revisited every theory, every timeline, every detail, now with one crucial difference. Proof. The ring is already placed inside an evidence bag. Because the ring could not be explained away. It had belonged to Daniel Cole. That much was undeniable. Pause again, which meant the impossible had somehow become real. Officials studying maps, ocean coordinates highlighted again. Search teams returned to the area. Advanced equipment, modern technology, drones, deep scans, everything that hadn't existed 50 years ago. Unbelievable. They searched deeper than ever before, longer than before, more precisely than ever before, and yet, they found nothing. No boat, no wreckage, no bodies. Each line slow, deliberate, no sign that anyone had ever been there. Empty ocean floor scans, blank. It was as if the discovery had never happened, except for one thing. The ring remained. Tested. Verified. Real. Soft tension rises again. The only piece of evidence in a case that refused to exist. Authorities reached no conclusion. Reports were written, but none could explain how the ring ended up there, or where the rest had gone. Final report stamped, filed again. Once more, the case slipped into silence, but this time it left something behind. Not answers, but something far more unsettling. Proof that the story wasn't over. Adrian alone, looking out at the ocean, holding nothing now, because somewhere beneath the surface, something still remained, waiting. Deep, echoing ocean waves underneath, and less view of the sea at dusk. The ocean has always been a mystery. Vast, silent, unforgiving. It gives and it takes, but sometimes it does something else. It keeps. Gentle waves rolling onto the shore, then pulling back. Stories, moments, people locked away beneath its surface. And though time moves on above, life continues. Memories begin to fade. The ocean never forgets. Some say the ocean keeps secrets. Others believe it waits for the right moment to give them back. Faint ripple across still water, as if something moved beneath, but not everything returns the same, because some things are never meant to come back. And somewhere there was long pause, somewhere far below where light can reach, a moment still lingers, unchanged, unfinished, a glass clink, barely audible, a bride, mid-smile, a groom, mid-promise, a celebration that never found its end, and somewhere beneath the waves, a wedding that never ended may still be waiting